Hey guys, Jake here. Welcome to the first video of my new series called MVP Flight Checks. The idea for this series came up over the winter when I was really bored because I couldn't play, and I was seeing a lot of really good disc deals, and I decided, hey, I kind of want to try all of the discs in the MVP lineup. That's including MVP, Axiom, and Streamline. So over the course of this winter, I managed to collect at least one disc of each of the various molds from all three of the main brands. And over the next few videos, we're going to throw them all side by side so we can see how they fly relative to each other. Now, this is clearly not a detailed, high quality experiment. We're only going to be throwing one disc of each mold. So the disclaimer here is, yes, I realize this is not a quality scientific test. There are so many variables involved in a disc flight, including, the wear, the weight, the plastic type, the temperature, and the environment in which the disc was cooled when it came out of the machine, as well as just throwing. I mean, I'm one amateur throwing these discs. You and me and Simon Lazat are all going to throw these discs very differently. So yeah, just I'm aware of that. This is more of an edutainment video than an educational video. So yeah, it's just been a sort of a thing I've wanted to do for quite a while since I haven't thrown a lot of the molds that are available from MVP. So hopefully you enjoy watching this as much as I've enjoyed making this video. All right, so we're going to be breaking the entire collection of MVP discs into a few different pieces, so it's a little bit more digestible. In this first video, we're going to be focusing on the putters and approach discs. For me, that's 4-speed and below. Sometimes you can consider the 4 speeds to be mid-ranges. At least the 4 speeds that are currently being produced by MVP, to me, this really feel like they fall into that putter line, so they're going to be included here. So within the putter group, we're also going to be breaking it down into a few different collections of putters, just kind of the way that I've visualized them in my head. So we'll go into that as we get into them. But I do want to kind of make it clear how I have selected the discs we're going to use. Tried to use the same weight for all the discs, excluding the glitch, or close to the same weight, I should say. Somewhere between the 165 and 175 sort of end of the spectrum is what I aim for. The glitch is clearly an outlier just because it is only produced up to 155 grams. But in general, that's what you'll find through all of these videos. And along with that, I'm trying to stick to just a couple plastic types for consistency. I've decided that I'm only going to be throwing either neutron, proton, or occasionally R2, just because those three seem to fly pretty consistently in my experience. There's a few outliers within like Streamline, but for the most part, I think it'll give us a good baseline. Some of the other plastics like fission and electron and plasma and stuff, they tend to have more variability in how they fly, either more or less stable than the sort of main 3 plastics. So we're just going to concentrate on one disc in one of those 3 main plastics. And yeah, we'll do that through all of these videos. So getting back to the putters, MVP is known for their putters. That's sort of their bread and butter, at least in my experience. Now that the hex come out, that's kind of become a bigger thing across the board, but in general, most people know MVP because of their putter line. And the way we're going to break it down is in the putters, I guess, that we're going to break down. We're going to break them into 4 groups that I've made up. The first group that we're going to talk about is the slow neutrals, is what we'll call them. These are all the discs that MVP currently makes that are in the 1 and 2 speed categories. And they're generally pretty neutral flyers. They're not going to have a ton of fade. They're not going to have a ton of turn. I'm not going to get into a ridiculous amount of detail on these discs. I'm saving that for my disc review videos. You can check my channel if you want to see specific reviews on specific molds. For this, we're pretty much just concentrating on how they fly in the one specific plastic. So to start with, let's look at the slow neutrals here. So first up, we've got a glitch. The glitch is the only one speed currently available. There is, some coming down. I believe the watt is also going to be a one speed, but as far as today, when this video is being made, the glitch is the only one speed available. The glitch is a very popular mold that, pretty much everybody's heard about at this point, because it is not only is it an approach disc, but it's also a hybrid catch disc. And it's also unique in that it's very, very light. Most of the one-speed discs that people use for catch are generally the same weights as you'd expect from, any other disc. They go up to that like 170s sort of range, but the glitch maxes out at 155 grams. And honestly, I think it does its best work even lighter than that. So this is probably the glidiest disc that you'll ever find. I'm really looking forward. I do bag this, so I do have a good feeling of how it flies. But as far as neutral, slow putters go, I think this is one of the best. After the glitch, we have the Nomad from the James Conrad line of discs. I have thrown one of these in Electron before. It was a while ago, and I don't really recall anything specific about it. But this particular one we'll be throwing is in R2. It's the only premium outside of some limited runs of plasma. It's the only premium ones that are available. The disc does have a little bit bigger bead as far as feel goes, not a ton, and it's supposed to have a hairless glide, but otherwise a very straight neutral disc. So we'll see how that compares to the glitch. I assume it's going to have a lot less glide and a bit more fade. So yeah, that'll be the Nomad. Next on the block is the Ohm. The Ohm is another very straight putter. It's pretty similar, I think, in flight path, from what I understand, to the Nomad, but maybe a hair more glide. I threw one of these a long time ago. I really don't remember anything about it. I think I got one in a mystery box or something. But I hear great things. I'm excited to throw it. I've also heard it's very similar to one of my favorite discs, which is the Pilot. This will be our last disc for the slow neutrals. The Pilot is a very glidey neutral putter. I do throw a Pilot. I don't tend to throw the premium ones very often anymore, but yeah, should be a very straight neutral flying putter with a touch of fade at the end. So we'll see. We'll see how those four compare and see how neutral they truly are. Yeah, so we'll hop into that next. All right, we are out here at one of my favorite local courses. I've got a basket here about 150 feet away from my little temporary tee pad here. That seemed like a good distance to attempt some sort of approach shots. This is outside of that range where you're probably not quite feeling the jump putt anymore, but you're not exactly needing a full throw, which is where I would expect to see a lot of these slow neutrals come into play. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw these guys just straight at it, flat, as best as I can. And we're going to see what happens. They should stay fairly straight because it is a set of neutral discs. And we do have a tiny bit of wind here right now, maybe 5 miles an hour or so, gusting a little more. But try to avoid that wind best I can so we can get a good idea of the flight. We're going to start things off with the glitch. Throw it directly at it. I expect this thing to just no turn, no fade at all. Sure enough, straight as an arrow. Next up, we're going to look at the Pilot. One of my favorites. I don't necessarily throw the premium ones, but again, we're going to go straight at the basket here. Not bad, a little more fade, obviously, compared to the glitch, but that's to be expected. Next up, the Ohm. Pretty similar flight to that Pilot. Maybe felt a little glidier and maybe a little less overstable, but that's very, very slight, if anything. Might have just been a weird release or slightly different wind. Next up, the Nomad. This should be the slightly more overstable of all of them. We'll see what happens. It does have a slightly different hand feel. I can tell there's a bead on here now, having thrown the other two. It's not super noticeable. It's not like throwing a rock or a comet or something with a crazy bead, but it's there. It's definitely there. All right, going straight at it. All right, I could see that being slightly more of a stable. That could have also been just the release. Maybe I put on a little bit of hyzer. Not bad. All pretty similar at that distance, aside from the glitch. So I'm gonna go grab those and we'll throw them again. All right, second round with the neutral mids. I forgot to mention this, or at least I think I forgot to mention this. All of the discs for this series are either going to be brand new or pretty dang close to brand new. There's a couple of these that have been thrown, a dozen or so times, but nothing, nothing should be beat up or scuffed in a way that should make it fly terribly different than brand new. So, having said that, obviously, aside from the glitch, these three putters kind of had a bit of fade to them, which makes sense because they're brand new. They're probably not going to be as straight as they will be eventually. So for this second round of shots, I'm going to start them a little more to the right, just because at this range, that fade is going to kick in, and it's probably always going to leave us just left of the basket if I try to go straight at it. So for round two, glitch goes up first. This one I'm going to continue to throw straight at the basket because, man, as soon as you get it, it's just dead straight. Kind of pulled that one off to the side. But you can see it was started on turn and just held it all the way. Didn't really turn anymore, didn't really fade out. That is a truly neutral disc, and it will show you every flaw in your form. All right, next up, the Pilot. Let this wind drop a little bit here. Oof, kind of put that one up in the air. Don't want to throw it that high. I wanted to throw it more low. But it did about the same as last time, just sort of straight and then faded out. Let's go with the Ohm next. Kind of put that one up in the air too. Looked like it was going to be on about the same line. Ended up catching that tree at the end, but I think they're pretty consistent. At this range, I think all these discs are going to fly pretty much the same. Just sort of straight with a light fade at the end, so nothing too surprising. We'll do the Nomad quick. All right, so that one I threw low and a little bit more straight at it, but again, same thing, just a very gentle fade. Not my best round of throws, but honestly, all those discs are indistinguishable at this distance. They really all fly about the same. Again, excluding the glitch, very different. Yeah, so we'll see what happens when we move them back a little bit further away. But for now, all seem about the same. Just feels the difference. All right, guys, we've moved back. We're now at about 250 feet. This is sort of the sweet spot for driving putters for me. Beyond that, you start throwing maybe a little harder than you'd like to for accuracy. So this just seemed like a good sort of 80% fairly accurate shot range. So we're gonna be going straight down here. We got sort of a alternating head tail wind, kind of swirly over here. So it's pretty light though, so it shouldn't affect anything. We're gonna start things off with the glitch here. Go ahead and see if we can get her there. So distance was pretty good. I did kind of release that one on just a hair of hyzer, and you can tell it just went up and just held it. Kind of just stayed off to the left side, but fairly straight, didn't fade out or anything. Yeah, just the most neutral disc you'll ever find. And honestly, at the weight of that thing, the fact that it doesn't flip and roll just boggles my mind. All right, next up, the Pilot. Again, I'm going to throw these straight at the basket as flat because they are supposed to be neutral, so we'll see how neutral they actually are. Looking back, that may have been on a slight hyzer, I don't know, but it definitely did have a bit of fade, so again, a bit more overstable than you'd expect for the numbers. Next up is the Ohm. So far, this one has been a little bit straighter than that Pilot, so we'll see. Got that one a little up in the air, but it did seem to have a little less fade, I think. I don't know. We'll have to see on the second throw. Last up, Nomad. Now that had noticeably more fade than the other two this time. I didn't notice it at the shorter range, but that time I felt like that one came out pretty flat and it started to kind of hyzer out. So I don't know. Kind of weird that you'd see that more as you speed up on the disc, but I'm gonna go grab those and we'll throw them again. All right, round two with the slow neutrals. At 250 feet, I'm gonna take the glitch first. See if I can't release this one a little bit flatter and straight at it. And the glide on that thing is just nuts. Very straight, very straight. Next up, the Pilot. This one's been the beefy one of the group so far. I'm gonna still throw straight at it because that's what you should be doing with this disc, but we'll see. Yeah, a little straighter, but it definitely had to put some juice behind it to get it that way. All right, Ohm's next. See if this one is a little less overstable than the Pilot. Started that one a little left, but that one felt pretty similar actually. I just don't think there's a ton of variance between those two and the Nomad. A lot of overlap, mainly just a difference in feel and which plastics you like to have or whether you like to have overmold or not. But the flights are very similar. All right, let's get this Nomad out there. Started that one out a bit left too. Yeah, it didn't seem as overstable this time. You could probably pick any one of those three discs and be very happy. And then you got to have a glitch. If you don't have a glitch, I don't know what you're doing, man. That thing is, it may be situational, but there are some situations that no other disc can do what it does. So, all right, next up, we're going to try a little bit of forehand. Not my specialty, but I'm sure you're going to want to see something. So I'll give you the best I got. We've moved back to about 200 feet. Seems like give a little bit more distance. I'm just going to try to throw these mostly flat, sort of straight at it, see how much they turn. The glitch, I have a feeling this sucker is going to kind of turn over a little bit because I'm going to have some off-axis torque for sure. But hopefully we can get some clean releases and you can kind of see what they look like. Actually, somewhat better than I expected. I did put it out on a little bit of Anny, but it really did a good job of holding the line. All right, next up is the Pilot. Really nice. Really held that line, didn't really try to turn over on me. Next is the Ohm. Another very nice straight shot. Last up, the Nomad. This one feels the least comfortable. I think the bead is just a little bit more prominent. Does not sit as nicely as I'd hope, but we'll see what happens. Kind of threw that one on a little bit of anhyzer, but in general flew about the same as the others. So all four of those actually forehanded fairly well at this distance, which is a little surprising to me. All right, so the next thing I want to do with these slow neutrals here is I want to try throwing them on some Annys. We're about 200 feet out right now. I just want to throw them on a nice gentle anhyzer and see how they flex out, or if they flex out at all, going towards the basket here. I'm going to start with the glitch. This one I don't expect to come out, so I think I'm just going to throw it on a slight anhyzer and see if it'll just ride in towards the basket. I threw that one slow enough that it actually did kind of pan out. Did not get all the way to the basket though, so you have to put a little more oomph on that one. We are kind of getting a little bit of a right to left wind, which is going to knock these down a little bit. Kind of hoping that disappears, but we'll still get a decent look. Go with the Pilot next. Yeah, they are definitely getting pushed this way. They aren't really riding too far to the right, but that one did do a nice little pan out to flat. Next, we'll try the ohm. Yeah, nice little pan out on that guy. Didn't fight too hard. Seemed very similar to the Pilot. We'll try the Nomad. I expect about the same thing. I don't know if I juiced that one more or what, but it seemed to hold the Anny a little bit longer before it panned all the way to flat. So, yeah, not bad. They will fight out, aside from the glitch. And I use that Pilot all the time for those shots. When I bagged it, I'd throw, just a high Anny and have it just pan around a corner. It works beautifully. And I imagine the other two would do just the same if the wind was slightly better. All right, the last thing I want to do with these neutral putters, since we do have this kind of coming and going headwind here. Now it's a headwind. We flipped around. That bench down there is about 330 feet. So we got plenty of room to work with. I'm just going to try to hit these hard and see what they do into a little bit of a stiff breeze. Stiff breeze being 5 to 10 miles per hour. Yeah, just to give you an idea if they'll get squirrely in the wind, which I imagine some of them certainly will. One of those being this glitch here. We got a decent headwind. Go ahead and see what happens. Nowhere near as much turn as you'd expect given this wind. It's actually probably closer to 15 miles an hour now. It just had a little turn initially and just kind of held it all the way out there. The problem is that disc's so light that it goes nowhere. The wind just kills it. Just sort of barely got down the fairway. All right, we're going to try the Pilot now. Very nice and straight into the headwind. Held up that really well. The ohms next. There was a kind of a drop in the wind there, so that one didn't really have to deal with it, but it did still, it held perfectly straight. Very nice shot. The Nomad, we'll see how straight this guy is. Yeah, I threw that one on a tiny bit of hyzer, and it just sort of held that line. So all three of those in the premium plastic really held up well in the wind. I'm sure that would change if you start getting into the 20 plus mile an hour winds, but for sort of average wind, not bad. So the next group of discs that I want to talk about are what I'm going to call the overstable utility discs. MVP has two very overstable putters currently available, and I feel technically, one is faster than the other. One is a 4-speed, the other is a 3-speed. And I feel like the one is a bit more overstable than the other, but in general, they pretty much serve the same purpose. So the first one that we're going to look at is the Entropy. This is a 4-speed disc, and it is the disc that I bag for an overstable putter. It definitely has some hefty fade to it. It doesn't turn in the wind, so we should be able to see that here today. And that will be compared against the Streamline Stabilizer. The Stabilizer is a speed slower and a bit more glide, theoretically. I had a glow one very briefly from a mystery box as well that I think I threw a long time ago. I don't really recall much beyond that, so it'll be interesting to try to throw this guy and compare it against my Entropy, which I use all the time. So let's go ahead and hop to the field and take a look at those. All right, now we're going to go ahead and take a look at our overstable utility discs. First up, we're going to be throwing the Entropy. I'm going to just throw them out a bit to the right, and I'm going to throw them flat and see if they kind of hyzer back in. On the pole. Next up, Stabilizer. That one actually seemed a bit more overstable than the Entropy. That's interesting. I do not remember that being the case. Yeah, we'll go grab those and we'll throw them again. All right, throwing our second round with the overstable utility disc, Stabilizer and the Entropy. Entropy's up first. Same thing, gonna try to swing it out to the right side, a little bit wide, see if it comes back in. Right on the money. All right, Stabilizer. Last time this seemed a bit more overstable than the Entropy. That Entropy has been thrown a few times, but less than a dozen, almost all in the field. So it should be pretty similar to a brand new. All right, Stabilizer, let's see what's up. That was a touch nose up, but that one seemed a little bit more consistent with the Entropy. They seem pretty similar. Yeah, they, at this range at least, they seem pretty interchangeable. All right, we've pushed back to 250 feet now with our overstable utility discs. Go ahead and start with the Entropy. I'm going to swing these out wide to the right, see if they'll come back in, see if I can even get them there. Not wide enough. Definitely had a hefty fade, a little bit of a skip off the end of that one. See how the Stabilizer compares. Felt like that wanted to push straight a little bit longer before it hyzered. I definitely had a hefty fade at the end, but it did seem to want to go push a little bit further before that happened. All right, we'll have to throw those again, see what happens the second time. All right, second round with the overstable utility putters. Going Entropy first. Again, to start way off to the right and let it hyzer back in. Did not start that right, but it definitely hyzered out. Bad throw, but a decent flight as far as being able to see what it's supposed to do. Stabilize, see if I can actually throw this one off to the right. It's a little bit better. Again, it feels like just got a hair less stability, especially in the initial part of the flight. It just really likes to push and hold straight. Very interesting. Reminds me of Volt and a Tesla, which we'll get to in a later video. All right, next up, we're going to do some forehands with our utility discs. This is kind of their bread and butter. Approach shots straight at the basket with an overstable putter is really one of my favorite ways to approach. So we're going to start with the Entropy. Should have a little bit more stability. And I'm just going to throw it along the left-hand side flat, and it should fade out right towards the basket. Not bad, not as much fade as I would have hoped. Maybe put a little too much juice on it. Stabilizer's up next. Also very straight. It may just be the wind playing with us, but they were very, very straight, nice shots. So both of those feel pretty good for me in the forehand. The stabilizer actually feels a little better. I think it might be a little bit shallower. But yeah, both very nice. All right, next thing we're gonna do with our overstable utility discs is do some flex shots. These ones should flex really hard. I'm gonna throw them high on a lot of Anny and see if they'll pan out. See if the wind's dead right now, so hopefully it'll be a decent example. That fought out almost immediately. At 200 feet, that disc is almost too much disc for throwing those Annys. You got to throw a hard, low flex with those guys. So next up, the stabilizer. Threw that one a little better, and it definitely had a slower flex. Yeah, very nice. I like that disc for that shot a little bit better. It's not quite as quick to fight to get out and get to the ground, so it kind of holds it a lot more like an Envy. So very nice for that shot. All right, next up, we're going to throw our overstable utility putters into this sort of light headwind. Throw them hard and see what happens. I imagine it's not going to be too surprising. They shouldn't turn over, and they'll probably hyzer out pretty hard. So kind of hoping the wind would pick up, but it's kind of dead right now. But we're going to throw it hard anyway. The wind came up a little bit there at the end. It is pretty straight, actually. It didn't hyzer out nearly as hard as you might think. But it's always reliable. It's never going to turn over. See about the stabilizer. Threw that one maybe a little high and a touch on hyzer, but it held up in the wind just as you'd expect. Nothing too exciting there. All right, so the next group of putters that we're going to look at are the putters that I call the OG putters. These three putters share a similar or the same core essentially with a different rim, and they are sharing the original Ion core, the first disc that MVP ever made. So this is the first sort of putter style that MVP ever used. So first one we're going to talk about is the Ion. The Ion is the original disc that MVP started with. The thing that makes these discs unique is the hand feel. There's a sort of curved inner rim so that you don't really detect where the flight plate meets the rim so much. In most discs, there's kind of a crease to put your finger. These are just a very smooth, rounded curve. So some people like it, some people don't. I personally don't. Simon seems to like it. So yeah, we'll see how they fly though. That's the more important part here. Along with the Ion, we have the Anode. The Anode is a similar feel and is really very, very similar in profile to the Ion. So I'm interested to throw the two and see if there's really any difference. But the Anode is supposed to be a hair straighter, a little bit less fade. We'll see how that comes out. I've never thrown an Anode before. The spin. The spin is the third disc in this setting, in this set of discs. And it is a very understable putter in comparison to the other two, and you can tell by the wing profile. I've never thrown a spin. I had one that I sold from a mystery box a long time ago, but I'm interested to see how understable this really is compared to the other two, because I haven't really thrown any understable putters by MVP yet. So excited to try this out. So these three discs are ones that I haven't really thrown at all. Should be fun. Give it a whirl. All right, next up we have the OG putters, starting with the Ion. I'm going to try to throw these ones just a hair off to the right. because they should have enough finish to come back towards the basket. I'm going to try to throw them flat. That was pretty low. I'll be throwing that one again. Not much you can gain from that. It did not fade super hard, but that's about all we can glean from that. Next up's going to be the Anode. Very gentle fade on that Anode. Definitely a noticeably less glide than those slow putters. Really just kind of seem to drop. Last up is the spin. This one should be pretty understable, so I'll be curious. I'm going to try to throw this one kind of more straight at the basket and see what happens here. All right, again, they seem to get pushed down with this little bit of tailwind that we have. And then they're just not as glidey of a disc as those slower ones. So I'm going to throw those again, and we'll see if we get a little bit different reaction. But I'm guessing it's just not the range for those discs where you're going to see much difference between them. All right, round two, throwing the OGs. Starting off with the Ion. We're going to try to get them up in the air a little bit more this time so they don't get knocked down. See if we can see what the flight actually looks like. Again, throwing just to the right of the basket and kind of letting it fade. That was pretty straight. Even with the tailwind, there really wasn't much fade on that guy. All right, Anode. Threw that one a little more straight at it, but again, really not much fade on those guys. Pretty straight. Next up's the spin. This one I am going to throw straight at the basket. Oh yeah, that thing had no fade. It just held dead straight. Just flashing the chains there. Very nice flight at this distance for a straight shot. Very similar to the slow neutral putters, or the glitch mainly, just very, very straight. All right. We've pushed back with our OG putters at 250 feet. Gonna start with the Ion. Gonna kind of throw these ones more straight at the basket. They should hold a little straighter at this distance. We'll see. Ion first. Not bad. I kind of started that one maybe a hair hyzer, but it seemed to push pretty straight. Next up's the Anode. Woo, that one's glidey. I don't know if that was just the wind or what, but it wanted to stay in the air. It did seem to hyzer a hair less. Nothing super noticeable, but last up, the spin. This one, I'm going to start off a little bit to the left because I think this might turn over. Oh yeah, a little bit of turn on it. That one you'd either want to hyzer flip up or start it a lot higher. Pretty good. We'll throw those again, see what happens. All right, second round with the OG putters. Starting off with the Ion. Going more or less straight at it again. Nice straight putter. If I like the feel more, I'd consider throwing it in the mix, but I just can't do it. Anode. Yeah, I don't see the difference between those two discs. The Anode and the Ion are the same thing in my brain. Spin. See if this one's as flippy as last time. I might throw it on a little bit of hyzer, more straight at the basket, see if we can get a full flight out of it. Woo, still turning. Yeah, nice understable putter. Again, I wish they made a disc that felt like the Envy Proxy Atom, the new ones. It had that kind of turn. Right now I have to rely on a paradox, so it'd be kind of nice to have that understable putter there. All right, time to try a few forehands with the OG putters. This could be interesting. As I mentioned with the hand feel, that curved inside of the rim makes it very hard for me to get a good forehand grip for where I feel comfortable. But we'll see what happens. We're going to start with the ion. I'm going to throw these sort of straight at it flat, and I don't expect them to turn much if I get a good release, but there's a very good chance I won't get a good release with these. Yeah, that was a pretty bad release, and I also threw it on a little bit of Anny, I think. We'll see if we can do better with the Anode here. A little bit cleaner release. It definitely flew very straight, had a lot less fade. Even than I think the slow neutral putters. That really felt like it went a lot straighter. Next up is the spin. This one is definitely understable, so I'm going to put this on a little bit of hyzer. Not too bad. Stood up, got to flat, pushed it out a little bit too far left. I should have gone more straight at the basket, but it flew beautifully. For as understable as that was, I actually felt like I got a pretty decent release on that one. Yeah, definitely not my favorite forehand disc. The feel on those things is just so hard for me to deal with. But they did seem to fly decently when I threw them decently. So if you can handle that much, I guess they're worth it. All right, so the next thing we're going to do with these OG putters is throw them on some flexes. I'm going to throw some flexes out here on the left and hopefully get them to pan back to the right. There's a little bit of a right to left wind going on here, so they are going to probably knock down a little bit, but we'll see what we can see. Start with the ion. Wow, I really did not fight much at all. It really wanted to just hold that line. Try the anode. So far, this has been almost the same as the ion, so I imagine we'll get the same kind of result. Yep, pretty much identical. Now the spin is a very understable disc, so this one I'm just going to throw on a lighter Anny because it should hold it all the way to the ground, shouldn't really pan out. Yep, pretty much exactly what I was hoping for. That's really nice. I love the flight of that disc. Just wish I liked the feel of it. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to throw the OG putters into this little bit of headwind. It's nice and hard. So we'll see what happens. Going to start with the ion. Very straight, very nice. Didn't have nearly as much distance as I thought it would. They seem like they'd be very glidey, but they don't seem to glide all that much. Do the anode next. That one had a touch of hyzer. Didn't seem to go as much as I thought it would. They really just sort of die. They don't keep pushing as much. We'll do the spin next. This one I'm going to put on a significant hyzer because it's understable. See if it doesn't turn into a thrower. Yeah, it just got knocked down. It flipped all the way over and started to turn and got pushed down. Yeah, none of those were particularly nice into a headwind. They really seemed to die. So the last set of putters that we're going to talk about, kind of in contrast to those OG putters that we were just looking at, I'm going to call these the new school putters. They're probably the most popular ones currently. They're the ones I like the most, but they do sort of fill the same slot. as far as like speed and distance go. These might have a hair more distance, but they have a different hand feel for sure, and they all share the same core, similar to the OG series. So first up, we're going to look at probably the most well-known, and that is the Envy. The Envy has a pretty standard feel for what a modern putter would be. It's got that sort of crease where your fingers are going to be able to fit in between the flight plate and the rim, unlike those original ones. This is a disc that I've thrown a whole lot. I do know it is an overstable. It's going to be straight with a good healthy fade at the end. It has good distance potential. Yeah, just a great disc. Excited to see it. Along with that, the other disc I've thrown quite a bit is the Proxy. The Proxy feels exactly like the Envy in the hand, just a much straighter disc. There's a little bit of turn when they're fresh, but mostly these are going to have a little bit of turn once they beat in, and not a ton of fade. Just a pretty straight disc overall. So yeah, I really love this disc and have thrown it a lot. I'm pretty sure I know how this is going to compare with everything else. The last disc we have is the MVP, the MVP Atom. The Atom sits somewhere between the Proxy and the Envy. The only one I've thrown is an electron plastic, and I did notice it flew a lot straighter than the Envy did. Very similar to the Proxy in my experience. But I'm excited to see how the Proton one will fly. This is kind of a cool Proton. It's actually probably more like an FX plastic, a run between Proton and Plasma, but hopefully that doesn't affect the flight too much. I'm assuming it's going to be a pretty straight flyer, maybe a little bit more torque resistant than the Proxy. So let's go check them out. All right. And for our new generation of putters, we're going to start things off with the Envy. I'm going to throw these out a little bit to the right, not too much, just like I did with the OGs. Just kind of see if they'll fade back in towards the basket, throwing them flat. Envy first. Whew, yanked that one off to the right. Good thing we throw them twice, right? Yeah, not much you can glean from that. It did seem to stay in the air a little better than the OGs. That could be just coincidence. And it didn't have a ton of fade, but it was also yanked off to the right, so I don't really take a lot of stock in any of that. Next up, we'll throw the Atom. Very nice on the pole. That one was also, not also, but I should say it was very similar to the slow putters in flight. It had just a very gentle fade. Reminded me of like the Nomad or the Ohm flight. Maybe just a touch less glide. Last up is the Proxy here. Another nice straight one. I forgot to say I was going to aim that one a little more straight at the basket since it's supposed to be a bit more understable. And yeah, it didn't really have much fade. The Atom had a hair more. We didn't really get to see the Envy. We'll have to check that out on the next throw here. But those two discs seem pretty similar. So yeah, we'll go throw them all again, see what happens. All right, second round with the new generation of putters. Starting things off with the Envy. This time we're not going to yank it. We are going to throw it just to the right of the basket and hope it just fades a little bit. Yep, very nice. Not a massive fade, but probably more than we've seen out of any of the OG putters and from the first round of these new putters. Atom's next. Very nice. That is a little bit closer to the Envy and fade on that one, it felt like. Probably would be hard to tell those two apart, at least at this range. Last up, Proxy. that one's just a hair straighter. Definitely no fade. So the Atom kind of felt more like the Proxy the first time, more like the Envy the second time. So maybe it does slot pretty nicely between the two. Get some more time with it. I'm imagining you'd get a more reliable result. But we're gonna say short range, just flat up shots. They're pretty similar. All right. Well, we've pushed back to 250 feet now with our new generation putters. We're gonna start with the Envy. Because this one is a bit more overstable than the others, I might start this one a little bit more to the right, but just going to try to throw it hard and flat. Right on the money. Very low fade at that distance. All right, Adam's next. I should see a similar flight with a hair less fade this time. I'm going to throw this a little more straight at it. I don't know if it was less fade. It was maybe a later fade. Very similar flights. Next up is the Proxy. I'm going to throw this basically straight at the basket. A little more understable. Yeah, no fade at all. Straight, just sets down perfectly flat. So yeah, the Atom and the Envy seem pretty similar. We're going to throw those again, see what happens. All right, second round with the new generation of putters, starting with the Envy. Going to throw it just off to the right, it's hard and flat. A little low and not quite as right as it should have been, but looked pretty similar to last time. Let's go with the Atom next. A little more straight at it. Not bad, light fade. Pretty much the same thing as last time. And the Proxy, straight at it. Yank that one a bit to the right. Very straight flight, and it's not coming back. So the flight was the same. Trajectory was all wrong, but consistent between those three. All right, let's try some forehands with the new school putters. We're going to start off with the Envy. This one should have a decent amount of stability, so I should be able to pop it pretty good and get some fade. I'm going to just go just to the left of the basket. We'll see if it goes nice and straight. Yeah, nice little fade at the end there. Next up, we'll throw the Atom. Should be fairly similar, a hair less fade. We'll go a little bit more straight at it. Not bad. Proxy. This one should hold very straight, maybe get a little bit of turn out of it. We'll see what happens. Yeah, that feels really good. You don't really have to put much on that, just a little wrist flick, and it just seems to go dead straight. Good glide on it too, so very nice. All right, next thing we're going to do with our new school putters is throw them on some anhyzers. See if we can get them to flex out towards the basket. We're going to start with the Envy. Again, we got the wind kind of pushing this way, so it's going to probably knock these down. They might not pan as well, but we'll see what we can see. Very nice. I love throwing an Envy on a flex like that because it has just the right amount of stability to slowly flex and pan. Go ahead and do the Atom next. I imagine it'll be pretty similar. Threw that one a little bit lower, but it did seem to have a pretty similar flight. It didn't flex out quite as hard, but you could probably use them interchangeably. I will grab the Proxy here. Do the same thing. This one I don't expect will fight out nearly as much. So I throw it on maybe a little less angle, a little bit higher, see if it can not cut roll. I got the height, but it certainly came out on a lot of Anny, so it held it all the way to the ground, about what I expected. Can be a very nice touch Anheuser approach disc. If you're a little bit closer than this, you could get the pan out. But I would probably choose an Envy over a Proxy for that shot, because at most of the time you're going to be a little bit further back. And if you're closer than that, I'd probably be throwing like a Pilot or an Ohm or one of those slow neutral putters instead. So still a nice disc, just probably not the choice I'd make for that shot. All right, next thing we're going to do with these new school putters, throw them into this bit of headwind, hard as we can, just straight towards the road over there, to see how they react. We'll start with the Envy. I expect this will hold up just fine. Yep, just a nice, good distance out of it, and also just really held the line. I came out on just a touch of hyzer and held it the whole way, so very nice. Do the Atom next, should be about the same. Threw that one a little low, but it did really good. It did seem like it was kind of starting to flip up a little bit. That may have just been the wind bouncing. I don't know. I think if I'd have got it further off the ground, it would have been about the same distance as that Envy. Next up's the Proxy. This one might turn a little. We'll see. Did not turn, but got decent distance into the headwind. Yeah, so out of all those discs, the only ones that really seemed to not handle that headwind very well was the Glitch, because it didn't go very far. And those OG putters really didn't seem to get as much distance as I thought they would. They really got slowed down by the wind, so kind of interesting. Didn't expect that. All right, so we got some throws in, some good, some not so good. Let's see if there's anything that we can conclude about these discs from our very limited test. We'll start with the slow neutral putters. First of all, the Glitch. I said it all the way along. I absolutely love this thing. It's the most true neutral of any disc I've ever thrown, but it's also touchy. If you aren't throwing the disc properly, it's not going to fly very well for you. And it's got, you know, that straight, beautiful, glidey path when you do it right, but can easily burn it over and have a bad experience if you got a flaw in your throw. The only other thing I could say is that the only time I won't have this in my bag is if it's super windy. It did hold up pretty well in the wind, but it just doesn't fly like it's supposed to in a strong wind situation. It sort of becomes a kite. If the wind gets underneath the flight plate, you're done. It's gone. This thing will float away on you. But yeah, everyone should have a Glitch. It should definitely be something that you're playing with and getting used to. Even if you're just playing before the round, you know, just playing catch, it's great for that too. But as an approach disc, it does some crazy stuff. Next up, let's take a look at the Pilot. The Pilot's one of my longest bag discs. It's been my putter for quite a while, my putting putter, and a throwing putter for me. After throwing the premium one, it does have a bit more stability than I would like to have, which is part of the reason it's not currently in my bag. I bagged the Electron ones because they're a little bit straighter. But it is still a very nice disc, lots of good glide. Yeah, not much more I can say about it. It's a pretty standard putter. It's going to be pretty straight with a very minimal fade. The Ohm felt exactly like my Pilot most of the time. Every once in a while, it would feel like it was a hair less overstable. In general, I think I kind of like the premium Ohm a little bit better than I like the premium Pilot. Unfortunately, the Ohm is only made in neutron plastic, so if I wanted to switch putters, I really couldn't. But as far as the premium discs go, this one's probably my favorite of those two. And the last one that we looked at was the Nomad. The Nomad did not seem to fly significantly different than the Ohm or the Pilot, maybe just a touch more overstable in certain conditions. But the most noticeable thing was the hand feel is a bit different with that little bit bigger bead. It just isn't as comfortable for me. Other than that, it's a very nice disc, and I could easily see myself throwing it if I didn't have the other two to choose from. Um, but yeah, as far as the slow putters go, there really weren't a ton of surprises there, which I guess I didn't expect there to be. It's a little surprising that MVP offers three discs that essentially do the exact same thing. At least the Pilot is streamlined, so it's a little bit cheaper and it doesn't have the overmold. But between these two, I mean, they're both MVP. They both seem to fly pretty much the same, the only difference being a little bit different hand feel. So I'm a little surprised they offer both. I'll be curious to see if they start expanding on the Ohm at all ever. I know there's a lot of people that still want to see this in a baseline plastic, but we've seen, this is like the third plastic we've seen from the Nomad already. So I don't know, maybe the Ohm is going to eventually disappear and, not be an option, or they're just going to continue to just leave it around in neutron for those few that still throw it. I don't know. But I really liked it. I really liked the Ohm, and I didn't mind the Nomad at all. And that's pretty much all I have to say about the slow putters. I don't think there's anything in that set of discs that's outside the glitch. The glitch is its own thing, and it's amazing. The other three, I don't think there's anything so special there that you couldn't reproduce it with nearly every other putter on the market in that sort of speed range. They're all pretty similar. Just do you like the feel of this plastic or that, slight bead or whatever? There's just very minor feel things that I think really come into play more than anything. So yeah, not much more there. Let's hop over into the overstable putters. For a lot of the shots, they seem very similar. Hand feel wise, it does feel like the stabilizer is a little more comfortable, especially for forehands. It's almost just a little more shallower. The speed difference is not terribly noticeable between the 4 and the 3 speed. The profiles are pretty similar too. I don't know. You could probably go either way. I think once or twice it felt like the stabilizer had a hair less overstability, or at least a later fade, which is kind of nice. I could see myself bagging either one, honestly. I'm currently throwing the Entropy and have a bunch of them, so I'll probably stick with it. But I could, easily see myself switching over to a stabilizer. I do know that Simon said he switched from stabilizer to the Entropy because he did have his stabilizer turn on him, but nah, I don't think there's too many people out there that are throwing as hard as Simon, so that's probably not an issue for most of us. So yeah, these are both very nice. I like them both. Have a chat about these OG putters. I still don't like the hand feel. But I did decide I really like the spin. The spin has a really nice flight. It's not as understable as I expected it to be. It's definitely understable, but it actually it's less so than like the Paradox, in my opinion. A little bit more workable. And honestly, like I said in one of those clips, if this had a different hand feel, I'd probably bag it. I really enjoyed the flight of it. Yeah, just a very nice disc. The ion and the anode, they both fly very nice. They're very straight. Not much fade off of these guys, but they didn't really have a whole lot of glide. And I could not tell you the difference between these two flight wise, as well as if you look at the profile of them, they're basically identical as well. It's really hard to see why these both exist, and they're both MVP. It's not like one's Axiom. So I'm not entirely sure. And I mean, I think the ion is supposed to be a hair more overstable, but it really just doesn't seem to show up, at least from when we were throwing it. And maybe that's just I get two slightly off versions of the mold, or because of the plastic type or something. But yeah, I could use these interchangeably and probably never know the difference. Other than that, I mean, they're very nice, straight flying putters if you can get past the hand feel. All right, in our last set of putters, the new school, these are the discs that I absolutely love and throw already, so no surprise I was still loving them by the end. The Envy, you'll never beat the Envy for me. This is the best disc ever made, in my opinion. It in all the various plastics, you can get so many different flights. In this particular one, we saw it was a very straight, with a nice, consistent fade at the end kind of disc. It was the most overstable of the two sort of core putter sets that we looked at, without being so overstable that it fits into that Entropy stabilizer kind of area. It's just right. It feels like to me. It has a great distance potential. Really was everything I thought it would be. Yeah, not much more to say about that. I will speak a bit more on the Atom. The Atom, I was not happy with the one that I threw previously, the Electron one for the Circuit Challenge, mainly because I expected it to fly more like the NB, and it flew more like a Proxy. But in the premium plastic, it really seemed to follow mostly the same lines as the Envy. There was only a couple times where I felt like maybe this didn't have quite as much fade. So I think if you're looking for something a hair less beefy than an Envy, if you lost your slightly beat-in Envy or something and you want to replace it, the Atom's a great choice. I mean, it feels identical in the hand, and it really has a pretty close flight. I don't think it's quite as close as like the Ion and the Anode, where you can't tell them apart. But you know, they're close enough that you could be mistaken in thinking that they're of the same mold, even though they aren't. They don't have exactly the same flight. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what I'm trying to get at there, but I liked it a lot more in the premium plastic, and it felt very similar to an Envy without being identical to the Envy. Last up, the Proxy. The Proxy is such a good disc and so straight, and still having such good torque resistance. It's it's the thing that sits between like a spin and the Envy, I guess. It's that perfectly dead straight putter, and there really wasn't. I guess it's kind of similar to like the Ion and the Anode. They had a little more fade, but yeah, just very, very straight. And I really love this disc still. So yeah, those are sort of my closing thoughts. It was fun to try throwing all of these, some of them that I hadn't thrown before. Nothing super surprising other than maybe the spin. The spin was probably the biggest surprise. I liked that a lot more than I thought it would. The rest of them are pretty much what I expected. So yeah, that's it for our putter breakdown. I'll be trying to come up with the mid-range flight check video here pretty soon. It might take some time for me to get these together because I do kind of want to wait until the wind conditions aren't too crazy and the weather's decent so that I can get some good video. And in the spring, that's a lot harder to do than it is at other parts of the year. So we'll see. We'll see how quick I can get it out. But that's sort of next on the docket. We're going to do the mid ranges and then fairways, control drivers, distance drivers. And then after I finish this series, I kind of want to go back and I'm going to do another series where I'm going to do some comparisons between some famous discs from other brands and kind of what they compare to, what they compare to in the MVP world. So you can look forward to that too. So if you're interested in any of those videos, feel free to subscribe. If you have any comments about these, putters, or have other questions or things that you want to see in the future, feel free to drop a comment below. Otherwise, appreciate you guys sticking it out. It's kind of a long video, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.